What's up, Blues, and welcome back to another episode of the City Social, where me and the fellow Bert put on a blue tent inspection, run you through all things Manchester City Football Club. My name is Steven McInerney, aka Esteemed Kompany. I'm your host, and joining me today is the elegant Gareth Barry to my boisterous 𝙏𝙬𝙚𝙧𝙖𝙬. It's the wonderful Bailey from the Sky Blue Times. Welcome back to the show again, Bailey. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm glad to be back on, and I must say your intros, I enjoy listening to the podcast as well. Just never seem to get old for me. You're always keeping them fresh. So yeah, always look forward to the start.
When I was doing this, I listened to a lot of video games podcasts, and there's one in particular I listened to, and they always have sort of like just a reasonably fun intro. And I wanted to make sure I did that. I want to give people, I don't know, every single time I do it, they get smiles. So I think it's worth it for that reason alone. Sort of gentle icebreaker. And I always mean it as well. I would genuinely consider you the elegant Gareth Barry, and I am the boisterous 𝙏𝙬𝙚𝙧𝙖𝙬. Both great in their own right, but one definitely much more useful. So I'd stick to that comparison. And the useful one is the elegant Gareth Barry. So today, I grabbed you away from the first game of the World Cup. If you want to know how dedicated we are to Manchester City content, listeners and viewers, I'm not even kidding. I've got ITVX on my laptop up right now, and it's playing Mexico. I've forgotten who it is. Mexico and
South Africa.
It's South Africa. I won't say South Korea then. South Africa. They're playing right now, and we're recording Manchester City content. So Bailey's an absolute legend for this. Thank you so much, my friend. Of course, today we're going to be talking about transfers, in particular wingers, because I think wingers are very much on the agenda, given a winger's been on the agenda as a potential exit over the past week. Of course, before you get into today's show, a bit of housekeeping as per usual. If you are watching on YouTube, please do get involved in the comments, be it future topic suggestions, guests you'd like to see on the channel or the podcast. And while you're there, don't forget to give the video a like and consider subscribing too. Don't forget, if you want to help support the City Social podcast going to something more, I do honestly have plans one day in the future to be something bigger, in person, a real studio, all that kind of thing. Please consider supporting on Patreon and YouTube membership like Max Marrero did. Thank you so much, Max, for signing up the other day. You're an absolute legend. If you want to help support a little bit more, the links will be in the description below. Don't forget, the City Social is a new podcast. Go and give a review and comment over on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or wherever you digest your podcasts. And of course, check out Bailey stuff at Sky Blue Times. There is a link in the description below. Bailey is a lot more cerebral than my take on football. He goes through the actual nuance, the tactics, all that kind of side of the game. Honestly, I genuinely, after games during the season, I browse Sky Blue Times like literally before I do videos. So thank you so much, Bailey, for informing people and educating people. It's great stuff. Go and give that a check out and follow Bailey's content. It's really, really good. This week we've got loads of great guests on. LB's making his debut tomorrow, actually, and also Joey from the Noisy Neighbours were coming on over the weekend. Please also check out the wonderful episodes. And yesterday's was a mammoth game. It was literally a 90-minute episode, a game of football. I had Murd from Maybe in Another Generation, who does podcasts around certain seasons, and I loved it. I know it was far too dense for most people, but we went through every single Guardiola season and talked about where they ranked and so on. It was just an awful lot of fun. It became a great celebration of Pep Guardiola. I got quite emotional during it, not in a literal tear sense, but more just the nostalgia of it all. And before that as well, me and Hugh Murray ranked Guardiola signings. Very good episodes. Not salacious, no, but great trips down memory lane. So go and give those a listen. But enough about all those guys, because Bailey is here today. And we're discussing wingers today. We talked about potential other positions, me and Bailey on WhatsApp, but wingers feels it's a bit more exciting than a backup right back anyway, if we're being honest. Wingers is a bit more fun. And also, it's very relevant because when we were discussing this idea a week ago anyway, the Savinho news hadn't really kicked off in the way that it had done. And Savinho, that's escalating quite a lot. And I think we're here because of this. So today we're going to go through potential Savinho replacements is not necessarily the right way of phrasing it, but it does feel sort of relevant given that he's going to be moving on, and therefore the lens is around right wingers, I would say, for this episode. So firstly, before we get into potential options at right wing, Bailey, why is Savinho going? Like, why are Manchester City willing to let a guy go now this summer that last summer they felt so strong and so passionate about keeping? I know it was sort of personal, the rumours with Soriano and so on, but they see potential in Savinho. I don't think they've hidden that. Guardiola's not hidden that. I don't know how much of that is lip service, but they've not hidden it. And I think they're telling the truth to an extent as well. So why now? Where's Savinho fallen short? And why do you think, or do you think that this is the right time for him to leave?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few different ways you can take this, right? If you look at even somebody like Jack Grealish, after his performances in the treble season, he then only had 2 full seasons before he was then looked to be moved on. So if somebody that costs that amount of fee, that delivers that much in a treble season, can only get 2 years, then why does somebody like Savinho need more than 2 years to be able to prove their progress, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can look at it in that sense. I think there's somebody that has a lot of value, right, and has that interest from Tottenham, so maybe that's a little bit of a factor in it, that there's a genuine buyer out there that is interested, and there's also the interest from Savinho to go play for Spurs, as crazy as that one does sound. And then I think for me, somebody that likes to look into the numbers on that side of things, wherever you look, and I've asked a lot of people about this online, you need to have something where you can go, that's the reason why that guy's going to progress. I can see one thing I can buy into. And I think
something the people to hang your hat on.
Absolutely. And the people who really weren't the kind of biggest fans of Jeremy Doku, there was a consistent belief among them, though, that when he's on the bench, that's a really good role for him and he'll impact the games. And at least you have that and you can go, okay, I can see where he can go. If you look at Savinho this season, Guardiola's mentioned several times that defensively he's not at the level that he needs to be. You look at possessions won in the final third last season, 0.7 per 90, ball recoveries 2.7. This season is down to 0.2 possessions won in the final third. So pressing high up the pitch, not having as much success. That's something that definitely the team struggled with. If you're looking at off the bench impact, 22 appearances off the bench, that's the joint most with 𝙬𝙬. He's got 0 goal contributions. 𝙬𝙬 has 5. Jeremy Doku has 4 goal contributions and he has less appearances off the bench. And if you compare that to City in the 21-22 season with that depth, Mahrez, 5 goal contributions, Sterling, 4, Jesus, 4, Gundogan, 6. You have all those options, right? And this season we've only got 𝙬𝙬 and Doku, and then I think Marmoush has 1. Then that's it. So if you're looking at that side of things, it's not good enough. His real strength has been 1v1. Last season, 1.8 take-ons successful per 90, 57% success rate. That's down to 0.7, 32% success rate. So he's dropped in that side of it. His creative numbers has been a big thing people have lent on from the first season. Provided lots of assists. I think it was 8 in the first season, which was really impressive. Had all those assists for Erling.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, all those assists for Erling Haaland. 11 big chances created. But then this season, 0 big chances created. Key passes down from 1.6 to 0.4 and only has the 1 assist. So it doesn't really matter what angle you look at. There's no way you can find and say that's at least where he's progressing. And that's without me mentioning the biggest elephant in the room, which is his shooting and his finishing, right? So I've not even got to that. And then when you want to look at the other thing people mentioned is that he plays incredibly well on the left wing. His starts on the left wing are Huddersfield Town in the League Cup, Brentford away, Villa away, Leverkusen at home, Sunderland away, and Villa at home at the end of the season. And it's probably only Villa at home where he's had a real standout performance. And I think the rest of them, he's not really been at the races. So if that's another angle people want to go with, then there's not a lot of areas, right? And then when you go back to it and you say Spurs are going to offer you 60 million, the player's open to the move, I think it just becomes a bit of an easy decision, right?
Yeah, no, I put on Twitter that essentially there are 3 things that are sort of indisputable truths. He isn't performing at a high level. He absolutely isn't. 2 summers in a row now, he's tried to move, and therefore his head's not in it. And Spurs are offering double the value that we bought him for. So it's twice the profit. His head's not in it, and he's not performing at an elite level. At some point, you have to just cut the cord. And if there'd been, at least consistency from this first season where there was signs of good creative outlet, at least he did get multiple many assists, to be fair to him, and if that carried on despite the rigmarole of last summer, despite the injuries that he started the season with, if he'd come back and showed that, and then you'd think, well, maybe there's an argument that with a bit of time he could go more. But I would argue, unfortunately, that he's dipped, as the numbers show, dramatically from his first season as well. And he wasn't it wasn't like he was at an elite level in his first season either. He was promising, absolutely, and some very good performances, but he wasn't raising the bar. If he'd stayed at that level, and he was, as you said, if he was at that level he was in his first season, but he was then taking some of those numbers but contributing from the bench, and at that point, sure, for the money that we pay for him, of course, if you've got a guy who grabs 3 goals off the bench and another 3 assists as a substitute, it's decent numbers, 6 goals or something like that, 5 or 6 goals as contributions as a sub for a team that plays on the forefront as much as Manchester City do. It's decent, isn't it? but that's not there, and that isn't the case, and that has led to potentially a gap in the squad. Now, you look at the options that we've got currently as natural wingers. Of course, Jeremy Doku's fantastic there. Semenyo's coming in, Doku's had a breakthrough season, sort of. I know it sounds weird to say, given he's already sort of a very famous name, but a real progression for him statistically and in terms of his impact, in terms of contributions towards the end of the season in particular. Semenyo, we know he's so ruthless in terms of what he delivers. Maybe not as fluid as some people would like as a Manchester City winger, but you cannot argue against those contributions. He contributes, absolutely.
And the floor off the ball with Semenyo as well, right? The floor with Semenyo off the ball, the bare minimum is he's going to do the work for you. He's going to be able to press high at the pitch and compete in the duels and support his fullback. So even if he doesn't have the game that's ideal with the touches and he's not as fluid as you mentioned there, you're not going to miss out on that. You look at Savinho when he came on against Arsenal at the start of the season, he switches off to press 𝙏𝙬𝙬 and then they have that attack and they score that goal. You can kind of say, well, it's his first appearance back from the summer break. It can happen. But when we played Madrid away in the Champions League in round of 16, and you look at the first goal, and when the team are not set up to press, but he goes by himself to press the fullback and open up the middle for them to transition. That's the same mistake, right? And that's at the other end of the season. You've not learned that lesson.
He is a lot younger than, say, someone like Semenyo, who's obviously, I know he's not played at the high level as much as maybe Savinho has, but there is age there. But essentially, City don't have to wait around for him. Some people, it takes a lot longer for them to click than it does, and essentially, Semenyo's doing it now, and Doku's doing it now, and then you look at that after that. You start to scratch around a little bit. Marmoush doesn't really get to game time as a winger like he did in the first season where Guardiola sort of operated off the left a little bit. I know even then he drifted central. 𝙤𝙬𝙬 a little bit, but Guardiola started to pull away from that towards the end of the season. I'm sure Maresca might consider it again. And then Foden doesn't do it much these days. Essentially, it feels like, in my opinion, we need a winger. How many wingers do you think we need? Is it a right winger that you would look to bring in?
We'll get into the options a bit later. I think that there's players on that list can definitely play exclusively as a right winger that could play between the two. And I think you've definitely got options between having Semenyo that can play on either side and is very comfortable with either of them to how you want to play that out. But for me, I think you definitely need three wingers that are out and out and serious ones. And then I think you've got a bit of room to be able to play with, to bear in mind something like 𝙤𝙬𝙬 can play on that right wing, especially when you've got Phil Foden and him in good form and you need to fit both of them into the team. It's inevitable that a winger's going to lose out. But it also goes back to what I mentioned at the start of the podcast with the impact off the bench. If Doku and 𝙤𝙬𝙬 are the guys that definitely can impact the game off the bench, you've not got Semenyo on the bench yet. So you want to add more players so that you're either forcing the guys that can perform onto the bench and have those options, but also then have another guy on there that can do that. So even if 𝙤𝙬𝙬, Foden, Doku say start, you've got Semenyo on the bench and you've got another guy on the bench to come on as a winger. In previous season with City, you could have Mahrez on the bench, you could have Jesus on the bench, but Sterling starting, and you have all these different options of players to be able to bring on that are kind of unhappy but want to come on, be aggressive, impact the game. And that's going to be, I think, a clear thing, right? When you look at Savinho coming on, there wasn't a consistent feeling that he was serious coming onto the pitch to make an impact and change the game. And you need that from the players that are going to do that.
Well, even, those names you ran for the quality difference, I'd have to have Gabriel Jesus of 4 or 5 years ago as an option off the bench right now, because so versatile, so serious as a footballer, in every aspect of his game. Of course, maybe didn't quite fill the electric potential that he promised early on, but unquestionably useful, unquestionably effective. The kind of guy stars he can go at the Bernabeu, can have a game, a phenomenal game, a goal and winning a penalty with Bruyne to take. That level of quality was our backup, forward essentially for many years, and Savinho hasn't even touched those levels. And I think it's fair to say that who knows how far he'll go, but I'd be amazed if he does at this stage gone that far. I don't think he'll do it at City. I think sometimes you can feel when it's over for a player at a club, because people they can have they can turn things around, absolutely, and maybe a new manager could do that. But I think he's checked out, and ultimately I think that's the most pressing thing here. He has checked out, and I don't want to be too cutting for a young man from Brazil who has no emotional connection to Manchester City, but Spurs are 17th 2 seasons in a row, and I know they're Spurs, and I know they have a fantastic stadium and a huge fan base, and they are traditionally a massive club. but they are a relative shambles. And to leave Manchester City, to want to leave Manchester City under Guardiola, despite having, I think I checked the minutes, he completed, in terms of minutes, I think it was 32 full 90s in his first season. An awful lot of football. About 50 appearances. A absurd amount of football for a 20-year-old who's just joined Manchester City. To want to leave after that first season, at that point, there's not much you can do, I think, and you got to let him go. So what is the role of this winger coming in? Like, you look at our front three, and you raise these points with the notes, so thank you so much for this. But you put, what qualities do we miss in the front three? And I don't want to get the credit for the questions. Bailey wrote these questions down, so I'll give him the credit, absolutely. But you did put, what is the role of the winger coming in, and what are the qualities do we miss? So yeah, to answer your own question that you wrote, what are the qualities that we miss in the front three currently?
Well, there's a few different angles to take with this. I think the first one I'd like to say is probably how well the winger can retain the ball. You look at how often City have lost possession inside their own half, particularly along the flanks, and having the option to play out that way. You've got two new fullbacks and they've settled in, and that's improved quite a lot. I know a lot of the focus with the build-up has always been, from most people's angle, on Donnarumma, but for me, it's always been a collective. And I think the fullbacks, I think the wingers, once they receive it and the options that they have to be able to deal with the pressure from behind and then progress up the flank under pressure. So I think that's definitely one thing. When I was looking at, there's a stat for danger zone losses, which is like a big area outside the penalty box. And we've always led the league for the fewest number of danger zone losses, around 16, 17 every season, whereas this season is up to 22.4. So I think having those kind of reliable options out wide that you can progress the ball to, that Haaland can link up with, that the fullback knows consistently, I have the option there. You think about how Kvara is able to make those kind of cute little movements that pulls around the fullback and opens up space, and then a midfielder can come over and link up. I don't know if we've always had the wingers out there that could do that job. Doku, we know, hands down, when he's fit, can do it. Savinho, that's one of the things he'll have to learn coming into a team that possesses the ball so much. But that's definitely something to look at with the wingers. Disrupting the opposition build-up. You think about that Villa game when we played away early in the season. It felt like our first line of the press was very soft, and we could put pressure on, but we were just chasing them around all the time. And so we were tight, but we weren't kind of somebody you'd look at and go, oh, he can genuinely win the ball off me. And Semenyo's a big impact on that.
I think it was Alvarez when he was at City, for example. Alvarez was relentless. The amount of times he won the ball high up the pitch, just through it's not even like he's faster than some of the forwards. There's just an instinct there, isn't there? An aggression to the game that makes him so effective. I don't know what it is, what it does, but it's a different feel, isn't there? Yeah,
I think there's a genuine intent to win that ball. It's not just chasing it for the sake of it.
Following orders. It's like, I want the ball.
Yeah, you're right. And for disrupting the opposition build-up, I think in the last 4 seasons, we're around 82%, and that's outside the top 5 for the last 4. So it's something City had earlier in their year, like 17, 18, 18, 19. But then towards the end of it, and I think particularly the way that the league has evolved, that's something to try and look at, a new manager to maybe try and implement and be a little bit more threatening. So that would be one thing I'd bear in mind. Think about where we're really strong in terms of counter-attacks. We have the 3rd most fast break attempts in the league. We have the most goals with Bournemouth and Brentford from counter-attack. So we can definitely create those opportunities. But do we have players that are able to take even more advantage? And maybe bear that in mind when people say, well, this winger won't be able to play in those situations at City, but City are able to score the most counter-attacking goals. So there is the opportunity to score those goals, as well as needing somebody that's able to retain the ball and carry us up the pitch. So you've got those two angles. Another thing with the high press, we lead the Premier League for high turnovers. We have the most lean to a shot, but we don't have the most for goal-ending high turnovers. So when we're high at the pitch and somebody like Rodri is able to intercept the ball in the middle of the pitch and then plays it into the one of the forwards, and it's not Haaland, it's somebody else, do we depend on and can rely on that winger to put that chance away? Has not always been the case, right? Even with somebody like Marmoush, Savinho, Doku's definitely stepped up in the last couple of months, and I think he's become that kind of player slowly, but you still want to see it for a full season, right? So having more players in the front line that can score those chances, that would be another thing for me. And so, I think all of those things. And then probably the last thing I'd go to is when Doku comes on the pitch, you know he's able to carry you up the pitch into the final third, pin the opposition team back.
Yeah.
It's something I think Savinho can learn. He's very powerful, has the physicality to defend the ball. We saw how well he played against Arsenal. But it'd be great to have another player that's capable of doing that we can rely on. So I think all of those things would be what I'd be looking at. And maybe just one thing that came to mind, actually, when you look at the players in the front line outside of Erling Haaland, probably the other thing is the runs either into the box or in behind. And we've probably not got another player. And Savinho can definitely do a better job. And I think we've seen this in moments. But another player that could offer that threat, that would also be something I'd be looking at.
So just to clarify, we want a guy who doesn't lose the ball, a guy who could carry the ball 50 yards up the pitch and pin people back, a guy who's great running behind, a guy who can finish on a counter-attack, and a guy who's really aggressive at intercepting, disrupting the opposition. To be fair, when you say all that, when obviously there were some gaps in some of the games, but you think, the classic wingers, people talk about people like Sterling, he ticks most of those boxes. Like, Sterling was brilliant at that, carried the ball, he would finish counter-attacks, he'd score loads of goals, not always clinical, I know, but he did score damn sight more than our current wingers, like 10 times more at times. And then you pick people like Mahrez, okay, maybe not the best disruptor, as you say, but Mahrez, maybe not going to run in behind, but he would clinical as anything, ridiculously good on the ball. You rarely get all of them, admittedly, but you can definitely, there are definitely bits that I miss. For me, I do agree what you talked about earlier about, I think we give the ball away too much for Manchester City. I think that's one thing I understood where Guardiola's trying to go, but I definitely feel Guardiola compromised a little bit on who he is, and I don't think it necessarily was a good idea. And I've felt this for a long time, that I think City's technical level, it's how to measure that. It's very hard, but the willingness to give the ball away has increased over the years. That's what I feel like, compared to when I think about classic Manchester City sides, and I spent a long time talking about them yesterday on the podcast. You just don't get the ball of them. They are relentlessly in control, and people like Mahrez and even Sane. I know he had his moments, but if he was locked in, Sane, just technical level, absurdly high. With his footwork, his tight control. But I feel like we're a little bit loose, and a little bit Savinho's decision making isn't that good enough. And Semenyo is brilliant, but he's definitely a little bit looser on the ball than what I've been accustomed to. And I do think, obviously having someone really fast, who can counter, who can score, who's great at disrupting, and all these kind of things is a massive checklist. But you aim for that, I think you do absolutely, you should aim for that. You should aim for someone, look, if they can't get, you mentioned 5 things there, you can't get all 5, minimum 3 or 4, and like, not just a guy who can score goals, it has to be many, many things. And I think at this point, and maybe we're seeing it now with Elliot Anderson, maybe they're sort of trying to think, fuck it, we'll just go out and get the best, the best midfield that Premier League currently has to offer in terms of his profile and his age and so on. Maybe at this point they go, right, we need to buy someone who's going to really fit. And you've brought a bunch of names to the table today. We'll go through them one by one. A lot of these are still very much, they're not punts as such, that's probably not fair, but a lot of them aren't the guaranteed superstar. A lot of these guys, I think all of them, if being honest, have to take that next step. But there is a wide range of players here. We're going to start initially with a player we've been linked to recently, 26 years old, at Everton, Premier League proven, Iliman Ndiaye. Now, you put this fella on the list, and why is he on the list for you?
Yeah, well, I think seeing that link was definitely a really interesting one. When we're talking about players that are serious, that you feel as if are going to come in and see this as an opportunity to improve a lot as a player and also want to make an impact right away, I think Ndiaye definitely fits that. I mentioned earlier about, in terms of the build-up out wide, needing to be able to dribble through pressure and progress the ball into the final third. That's what Ndiaye is excellent at. At Everton, you don't necessarily have the team that once he gets into the final third that are able to kind of string that into possession or he's able to link up with, but definitely the process of moving the ball out wide under pressure, past fullbacks and wingers, etc., and really be able to dribble his way. The way he keeps players in his peripheral vision very, very well, uses a really good change of pace, is able to use both feet to dribble, to pass, to shoot. So an incredibly tricky player to be able to deal with. Persistent dribbler. I think he's on 2.3 successful dribbles per 90 in the Premier League this season, 54% success rate. As well as that, then you've got the work rate. So these are the kind of two standout traits of him. Is that dribbling ability, particularly out wide, but then also somebody that I think is the leader for ball recoveries amongst wingers in the Premier League this season. He's able to, and then you would have noticed this when we played Everton, he'll definitely get back and support the fullback. So if you're a Matheus Nunes or a Nico Riley or Josh Carvalho, whoever's on either flank, he's going to come back and help you to double up. And that's something we mentioned with Savinho a bit earlier, that the floor defensively is at a really high level. So regardless of what they're able to offer in the final third, you know you're not going to lose anything. If anything, you're going to gain something off the ball. Somebody that's versatile. Grealish just come in, so he's had to suck it up and play on the other side. But he's very capable playing on either side. Definitely has a preference to play on the left, moving onto his right foot. But I don't think it would be that concerning, as well as being somebody that can play in the middle, that can play it as a striker as well. So it just gives you all of these different options. But the standout would be what we mentioned earlier with the build-up, somebody that's dependable out wide to progress the ball. And then in terms of where you're probably looking at concerns or where you want him to improve, you are making a bet on him having more chances at City, more opportunities to shoot, because he is very reliable when it comes to his carries and turning them into shots. But when you look at his shots per 90, I think he's on 1.3. Doku, Savinho, Marmoush, Semenyo, Haaland, all of those guys, Foden, Cherki, are all above 2. So you're thinking if he comes to City, he's going to get more opportunities to shoot. He's going to get more chances to be able to score more goals, because the numbers, 6 goals, 3 assists this season, although he is pretty much meeting his expected numbers, you'd want to see a bit more, right? And considering what the price could be, if Everton want something more like 80 million, you'd want to see a bit more numbers. But one thing I did find interesting was that they bought him for 15 million from Marseille. So I'm not sure how much the fee needs to be for that to be very worthwhile for them, right, in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, also to be fair to him, 9 goals the season before as well, 11 all competitions the season before. So the guy, he knows how to score, you know, and he had a good record, a decent record of scoring at Sheffield United. One thing I like about Ndiaye, away from, you know, the numbers, there's a humility to his game. I think it does come from his background, you know. I think it does help when you've had nomadic career isn't necessarily fair, but the guy was at one point in his career on loan at Hyde United, so that sort of shows you, you know, where he's been and what he's been. He's been in the Championship with Sheffield United. Was it Chris Wilder who's manager there? Was it? I mean, I think it might have been back then. But either way,
probably always is.
I mean, it usually is a Sheffield United. Either way, the point is he's. Well, I guess the point I was going to make is that he's worked on the old school. You know, the old school. And David Moyes this season, and look, I know that's not Guardiola, but Guardiola has a respect for these sort of managers for a reason, because they're going to usually, and I don't want to be too cliched, but there's a certain value to these managers that you know that they have their own values, and usually it's about commitment and so on. You have to sort of do the hard yards, and as you said, he thought the guy works. He works hard, and he's where he is now because he's talented, because he's focused. And look, the money would be an issue, I think, potentially. I don't know what they'd ask for, but given what we're probably about to pay for Elliot Anderson, I can't imagine a forward who scores goals would come cheap, you know, from Everton, because they don't want to sell him and so on or whatever. But I like him. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's a superstar, but I do think he's the kind of person, as you said, who got more of the ball, more chances and so on. These volume of shots would go up naturally, you know, because certain players, like for example Jack Grealish, I never got the impression he would score a lot more goals, because he just, for somebody, you can see he's a guy who doesn't believe he's going to score goals. I think Ndiaye is a little bit more aggressive in terms of getting his shots away, from what I can tell. And I do feel in a team that is camped in the opposition half a lot more than Everton ever were, that he would just get more chances naturally, and he would be a little bit more effective. Of course, there's question marks there, but I like him. You know, 26 years old, very Premier League proven, humility to his game because of his career, his background, as you said, comfortable on both sides. He'd be an interesting signing. Now, next on the list that you provided, Trincao, 26 years old, think it's fair to say he's been sort of rebuilding his reputation after a big money move early on to Barcelona as a kid. Didn't really go well. Went to Wolves on loan, I think it was. And he's a pretty high volume contributor for what I can see. I saw a lot of people online a little bit, I've seen him a bit as well for Wolves. I've not watched him loads this season, but I know of him. I've seen him play. A technical player, very good at the link up. Not lightning quick, I would say, but you obviously know a little bit more about him. But the impression I got from him is smart footballer, who knows how to score goals, knows how to create. Maybe not a genius, but I like what I've seen from him so far. Why is he on your list then?
Yeah, I think he's more of that kind of left field player that's in the prime age, but also fits being a right winger that's left footed, that likes to be able to create cutting onto their left foot. And so if you're looking for maybe take less risks, but you also feel as if the options in the Premier League would maybe be too expensive, as we just mentioned with Ndiaye, right? Then I think the release clause is reported to be around 60 million euros, as well as being at Sporting. I think that's probably an easy deal for them to be able to do. He's somebody that has over 20 starts in the Champions League, has 4 goals, 3 assists in 11 starts this season. So there's a big sample size, both in the Portuguese league, but also the Champions League, that this guy's able to score goals and create them as well. You just have a better idea of what you get at. As you mentioned there, not somebody that's lightning quick, somebody that has the long legs, the long strides, is able to cover a lot of distance in transition, to carry the ball out wide, as we mentioned, being something quite important. And then being a kind of known commodity that wants to be able to hold the width on the right hand side and cut inside onto his left foot. If you look for all of his goals in the Portuguese league, somebody that definitely knows how to cut inside onto his left foot into the far corner, is able to score from cutbacks across the goal quite well, nice and composed, sets his feet nicely for those, is able to find both bottom corners. You'll be able to see this for all his goals. He has those kind of finishes down.
He definitely can finish.
Yeah, for sure. So I think if you want somebody that is definitely, you've got the big sample size, he's tends more towards being a creative player. Probably say he's more of a finisher than a shooter, if that makes sense. That's where I'd go for. And then also I've read some nice stuff in terms of former coaches saying about his mentality, somebody that is very focused, goes to the gym, pure focus, knows what he wants, knows what he needs to do. I hope he goes
to the gym as a footballer.
Yeah. But the coach was comparing him to Neto as well, saying how Neto is this kind of like physically strong, faster player, whereas Trincao is definitely more technical, likes to move inside as well onto his left foot to be able to shoot, to be able to combine with the kind of fullback on the outside as well. All those sort of things compared to somebody like Pedro Neto. So yeah, that would be why. I think if you're coming to the end of the World Cup, you want a winger that absolutely what you're kind of getting for that kind of price is an easy deal to do, then that is definitely an option I think they could look at. As you mentioned there, somebody that is 26, I think that's definitely something you'd wonder about. His success at Wolves, would that put you off as well? I think some of the underlying numbers were quite positive, but it's still at the end of the day, it's a move that didn't work out in the Premier League, much more physical than the Portuguese league. As we saw with Nico Gonzalez when he moved over, it is a big leap physically to be able to get used to. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's kind of a good amount of reasons to be both like quietly optimistic. It could be kind of surprise one, but also to be quite concerned how that would pan out.
Next, you've listed, I butcher his name, I'm so sorry, mate, Magnus Akliouche. I'm not sure if that's pronounced right, but I know well of him because I am on football Twitter. 24-year-old wide playmaker at Monaco, a darling of the football hipsters online, if I'm being honest. The guy is highly technical, which is obviously very, very easy on the eye as a footballer. And a guy who's been linked to pretty much most European clubs, I would say, at some point. A really skillful player. So what is it that draws you towards Akliouche? And have I pronounced that right?
Yes, Akliouche, you got that right. 24 years old, 60 million fee, I think is the reported release clause. Might have changed, but it's around that kind of similar amount. So you're not talking somebody that would be really quite high. You've got that sample size in the last 2 seasons, over 25 starts in both of them in the first division in France, 6 goals, 6 assists this season, and then his 5 goals and 10 assists last season, 20 starts in the Champions League with 8 goal contributions. So somebody that could definitely perform and play in the Champions League. Somebody that's a very hard worker off the ball, will be attentive if we lose possession to get back and recover possession. Is kind of the go-to, funny enough, playing for Monaco that people would say if you want to try and directly replace the Monaco version of Bernardo Silva, that was that winger that likes to play on the right. Yeah, move on to that left foot. Very, very technical. Probably more, like if you're looking at Elise playing on that right wing, he's more that kind of moments of magic, can pull a rabbit out of a hat. Whereas Akliouche, I would say, is more about just consistently making good decisions rather than having...
Bernardo's like as a winger, wasn't he? Yeah. Reliable,
sure.
Incredibly reliable.
Yeah, and has a bit more size about him. And yeah, as I mentioned, somebody that will work hard off the ball. Is very good with those kind of like incisive carries and passes into the half space, into the kind of space around the top of the box. So if you want somebody more like that kind of style of winger, like Bernardo used to be when he first came in, and you also want to make sure, because if you bring somebody like this in, you're probably removing the opportunity to play a Foden and a Cherki there, because you've got a guy that can do the job in the way they would do it. And so you would free those two to play exclusively in the middle. Then yeah, this is why that's why I think you'd go for him. Whether he'd be the kind of top tier kind of dominating UCL attacker, I'm not entirely sure, but he's definitely at the level to play as a good one, and to do that coming in straight away. So yeah, that would be why I go for. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of those wingers that are able to do the carries and play out wide and be the kind of like dominator 1v1 like Doku, I'm not necessarily sure he'd be able to do that, but it is being somebody that likes to come inside and find those kind of pockets as well. That is something that he would be able to do. So yeah, I think there's lots of appeal to it, but that is a kind of distinct way of you going, I want to sign that kind of more technical player that raises the level of the team, that can retain the ball out wide, and is maybe not, because Mahrez was never that kind of high volume player that was just carry after carry after carry, take on, but he'd always retain the ball and make good decisions and be safe, as well as take risks when he needed it, and Akliouche is more in that camp.
Yeah, and also score an awful lot of goals, Mahrez. You know, I sort of, coincidentally, I was just looking at Mahrez's stats and I forgot how many goals he scored for City. 15, 24, 14, 30. The guy's scored goals regularly. But I like Akliouche, what I've seen of him. I'm not going to sit here and ever pretend that I've watched more of a play than I have. I've only really watched compilations that I've seen knocking about, and I've seen the odd performance of Monaco here and there in terms of when it's just on in the background. Yeah. But what I've seen of him, I think he looks like a really smart player, and he's the kind of player that I do sort of miss him, being honest. You know, I like it when we have the smartest wingers in the room. You know, the ones who do keep the ball, who do raise the technical standards. And Akliouche is very much a player I can imagine Guardiola loving 5 years ago. You know, and falling for a little bit. Look, Bernardo. He's not Bernardo Silva. He's not quite the same player, but there is elements to his game from what I can see of that, and you can see the comparison. Obviously, the Monaco links absolutely helps, but he's a guy I would, if he came in, I'd be very happy about that.
And that relationship with Cherki as well, right?
Yep. Well, there we go. Yeah, there's exactly. And the next guy on the list, absolutely. Now, this is a sort of detour, I would say, from the technical, the sort of subtle, elegant players that we've been discussing so far. Diomande, an explosive, aggressive, lightning-quick talent, 19 years old, Ivorian. RB Leipzig signed him only a year ago, which I was only just reading about before this. For incredible punt for them, by the way, for 20 million euros. And bear in mind, the guy was like just a kid. He was a teenager when they signed him. He only played 10 games in La Liga from Leganes, and they went for him for 20 million his release clause, which is a really impressive little bit of business. Once again, these clubs, you know, they have an eye for a gem there, but he's had an incredible season on Leipzig. 12 goals, 8 assists. And this guy is all about that explosive acceleration and dribbling, and so direct and so aggressive. Very different to the other names on the list so far, right?
Yeah, very different. This is the kind of hottest prospect of the summer window, I'd say, for a winger. You've got those links to PSG and Liverpool quite heavily. I believe City have always been tagged in most of those links as a club that has acquired and is kind of on the outside looking in and interested. Yeah. So definitely something that they could accelerate. Has that big price tag, 100 million is what Leipzig are apparently looking for, as well as looking to try and extend his contract if he does stay. Bundesliga this season, 28 starts, 33 appearances, 12 goals, 8 assists. So you've immediately got those numbers in that first season. An incredibly interesting rise, as you've alluded to there, right? Somebody that come from Ivory Coast, moved to the US when he was only 15 years old. He was even playing at Daytona Beach. So there's probably a lot of people that are American listening to this. Yeah, that can definitely understand where he was only very recently. 2023 as a trial at Rangers and ends up deciding not to take up the contract with them and stays in the US. Then he goes to Spain, plays a season there, and then goes to Leipzig, and they kind of find that nice.
I love
deal,
it when
right?
this happens. By the way, sorry to interject, mate, but I love it. I love a nomadic story like that where he's too young to be nomadic, but when they go around, they move around, and they are doing it for their career. They put the hard yards in, essentially, and they chase that dream all the way around the world. I really do believe, there is Semenyo's got a bit of that where he's been at every single step of the the English pyramid and so on, where they are working for it. They are chasing that dream massively. And the fact that he will go to have a trial in the Rangers, and he's from Ivory Coast, and he'll go to, be in the US and all these places, it absolutely adds to their story and their character. And I really do. It's not easier it's not easier for someone to break through at Manchester City, but it's definitely more comfortable, I would say, as an academy player there when you just training as an under 18 with with Guardiola and all these great players, where this guy's out there busting a goal all the way around the world, to make it. And yeah, I like it. I think it's just something that draws me to a play in general.
Yeah, for sure. You think both sides, right? You're playing in the US, you're coming from Africa, and then you're going quite quickly into the first divisions in Spain and then Germany, as well as that off the pitch. You think wages wise, what would he be on when he's in Africa versus suddenly shooting up in a couple of seasons and he's playing in Germany in the first division, and you're looking at 100 million moves. So on both sides of it, there's a lot of change for the players. So as you mentioned, it's really impressive that they're able to handle that quick rise on and off the pitch and still be able to perform. So I think that's definitely something to look for, to be able to look at and say is a positive. In terms of good things, like that kind of electric first step, he plays a lot, more so on the right-hand side at the moment. So he has a lot of minutes on there. So somebody that could come in and play on the right-hand side for City. Probably not his preferred position, right? He'd probably prefer to play on that left-hand side. When it comes to cutting side onto his left foot, that's where he struggles. And if you played him more on the right-hand side, you'll see him a lot get pushed down to the outside to his right foot, be forced wide, which then kind of leads you to that kind of concern of if you're moving him into the Premier League and you're making that big move for that fee for somebody to come in and play on the right-hand side, that's not going to be their preferred position. Doesn't make too much sense, right? If Liverpool were linked to him and they're looking to buy him to play him on the right, it makes a lot less sense than if they were looking to bring him in and be the kind of main force on the left-hand side, where he would prefer to play, cutting in onto his right foot. In terms of you mentioned about the carry numbers, the dribbles, like he'll top nearly all of these metrics because he's tremendously good at carrying the ball up the pitch. Maybe if you look at the positions you get into, they're not the most dangerous, but in terms of the volume, and that's what we saw from Doku in that first season, the volume is there through the roof, and then it's about kind of harnessing that ability and moving it in the right direction as Doku was able to do. You'd have a little bit of that with Diomande, although he has some of those numbers early on. Separation would probably be one of the concerns I'd mention if you're putting him in a Premier League, you're playing for a top club and you double up, you triple up, and you have to try and create space to get that separation to be able to make the passes or get your way into the box. Not necessarily the very best thing he's got in his locker just yet. So that would be one thing. The kind of timings of the runs are not the most consistent, not somebody that attacks the back post relentlessly either. So when you're going back to 100 million price tag, and you've not got the kind of complete package. Don't get me wrong, there's somebody that would be a kind of impactful attacker in the Champions League. But when you pay that money, as we've seen people talk about online with Anderson, you want to pay that money for somebody that's going to come in immediately and change the game and be a starter week in, week out. I think he would need time to adapt, to bed in, have areas he needs to improve. So when you're paying that versus some of the other options that we mentioned that are probably more towards 60, 70 sort of mark, and are a lot more further along in their development, I think that gives you a lot of pause for concern with the player.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I mean, there's of course going to be sort of rough edges. He's so young. It's all happened so quickly, as we talked about there. But obviously an explosive talent, and one fearless, and clearly takes everything in his stride and looks like an electric player. Now, the next name, the final name on the list, it was a bit of a surprise one. I don't really know anything about, I'll be honest, other than the fact that he looks a bit like Leroy Sané, so I'll take that. And he's also one of the fastest players in Europe, for what I can tell. And Sané was absolutely one of those. Jean-Matteo Bahoya, 21-year-old French winger at Eintracht Frankfurt. What I can gather, he's very much stepped into that post-Marmoush Ekitike sort of world over at Frankfurt, and he looks like he's a really smart player. Now, for people who aren't familiar like myself, could you fill us in a little bit? And why is he on your list as your surprise option?
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to put somebody in there that would be left field, that nobody is talking about, that we're not linked with, as a bit of a kind of different option to look at. So if we're thinking that Jeremy Doku and Anton Semenyo are serious wingers, are looking to start week in, week out, to play 3,000 minutes, they should both be trying to get 30 goal contributions across all competitions. Then perhaps bringing in somebody that does want to play on the left wing, can create moving onto their right foot, particularly with the crosses into the box, that brings a different kind of ability with his pace. As you mentioned there, I think it was a Bundesliga record for speed, 37.16 last season, and only Walker, Mbappe and Van de Ven recorded higher speeds across all top 5 leagues. So he brings that unbelievable pace, really tall player, good stride length. If you watch him, he's very similar to Mbappe's kind of running style as well, with those kind of long legs. Probably takes a little bit more touches when he is running. So he brings that kind of pace, somebody that will make the runs in behind, that will attack the back post. As I mentioned, likes to cut onto his right foot, is quite good at creating separation to be able to find those crosses. Not necessarily the most consistent in terms of what man he's targeting, but the technique is there, but the selection is not necessarily the very best. But if we want somebody that's going to come in with those kind of qualities that you could work on across a season, that is able to give Jeremy Doku the rest so that he can play his very best, but not have to play all of the games. And then by doing that, you free Semenyo to play exclusively on the right wing, somebody that we know without a doubt can play over 3,000 minutes and play 490s. So, suddenly then that right wing's going to be secure because we're helping out with that left wing. Then that's somebody I'd look at. He's not someone that has had an unbelievable season. You look at this one, 15 starts, 27 appearances, 3 goals, 4 assists. Last season, 10 starts, 2 goals, 2 assists. But the dribbling has really improved from the last season. So, he's on 1.5 successful dribbles per 90, 59% success rate, up from last season's 0.7. So when you're looking at all those different qualities, somebody to come in that could develop, whilst you're buying him from Frankfurt, not on the season where he's going to cost you 80, 90, 100 million. He should be on the cheaper end. They only bought him for 8 million euros from a club in France as well. Then that is what I'd be looking at, especially when you mentioned that you're spending that money on Anderson, you're looking at a right back, you could be looking at a second midfielder. Maybe we bring in a winger that we know is going to be more towards that kind of 50 million mark, that can develop, that has qualities that the squad could need in the front line, whilst pushing the other guys into the kind of limelight. That's what I was thinking with this pick.
He's incredibly fast, young, and looks like Sané. That'll do for me, absolutely. And sometimes football can be just as simple as that. It's not as simple as that, but would do. So all these players you've just mentioned, you're Hugo Viana tomorrow, so you've got loads of money, you're a millionaire, and you're on the coolest man in football. Who do you go out and spend the money on? If it was your choice, Bailey, who do you sign for Manchester City Football Club? Just one of these guys.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot there. I think I'd go for the last one, to be honest with you. I really do like his pace in behind and the qualities that he does have. So that's what I would go for. And I really do trust Semenyo. I trust Jeremy Doku, and also with Cherki and Foden as well. I expect Foden to be back to a very good level next season.
I agree.
If they're doing that, one of them is playing on that right wing spot. So for me, I'm looking at somebody that's able to impact the game off the bench, that can provide the support on the left-hand side. And as I mentioned, provides that kind of game-breaking quality with his pace to be able to run in transition, run in behind, impact the games off the bench. I think that would be very useful, as well as I mentioned a bit earlier, like he is somebody that can create kind of onto his right foot to be able to cross into the box, that's something Doku hasn't quite got down yet. So it's a good quality to add to the squad. So that's what I'd be looking at. But yeah, I think there's definitely players on this list. I'd probably say Ndiaye is one of those that feels as if a lot of people are sleeping on how good he could be at City. He really has a lot of quality, but he's kind of looked down on like, that's not a big popular signing, right? Compared to somebody like Diomande. But yeah, I think Bahia for me, I'd like to try and get that signing that's like a little bit through the numbers, that you get a little bit before everybody else at good fee, a little bit like how we got Kusanov and everyone thought that's nobody, right? And then a year later they're like, oh, he's really good.
Well, how you've described him sounds like essentially the forward version of a Kusanov, you know, like essentially like young. There's clearly flaws to his game, but lightning quick and you know, obviously diligent as well in terms of it. He does what I was reading about him. Looks like he works really hard as well still, and he's getting better, you know, week on week almost. Lightning quick, a real raw talent, but a proper talent. So don't know much about Jean Mateo Bahia, but that's who we should sign. So Hugo Viana, if you are watching this, Bailey's just done your job for you, mate. Go and pull the trigger. If not, sign Ndiaye, maybe all of them in. Who knows? Who cares? Well, I'm sure we'll sign someone and it'll be an awful lot of fun. Mate, that was great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for the suggestions. Bailey, thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Hopefully this doesn't age too badly for me by next week. But yeah, really enjoyed coming on this episode. So yeah, thank you again.
No, my pleasure, mate. And of course, go check out Sky Blue Times as always. Bailey does wonderful work over there. And we probably will sign one of these guys. I've just got a feeling in my gut that will happen. And then we'll be able to pull out and you look like an absolute genius, my friend. Guys, I hope you enjoyed watching or listening to the City Social. Once again, please consider giving the podcast review. Get involved in the comments below. Let me know on this list who you'd like to see in a Manchester City shirt for next season. If not, who else would you like to see if it's not one of these guys? While you're at it as well, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, go and give the podcast a review as well on the podcast services of your choice. And I'll be back with another episode of City Social tomorrow. LB will be joining me. I'm going to get his opinions on Elliot Anderson and all the noise around that. Of course, check out yesterday's episode with Murd from Maybe Another Generation. We walked through Guardiola's 10 seasons. And prior to that, Hugh joined me as well on the channel. For now, though, until then, Blues, we fight till the end.